gentlemen, you've tuned into the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance. Cops for Kids, a subsidiary of the Indiana State Police Alliance. We want to thank them for their continued support of the ISP Roadshow. I want to thank Tom Trial, man behind the scene, putting us on YouTube each and every week. Make sure you go to our Indiana State Police YouTube site and watch all the videos that Tom has placed on there, from history to brand new stuff that's happening around the state. Tom's waving at me. Good job, Tom. Appreciate it. With me today, I have Captain Irv Falk. He's the Communications Director for the Indiana State Police. And thank you, Irv, for being in here. I appreciate it. The first time?
Yes, this is my first time.
Well, glad to have you here. Thank you for coming in.
Good. It's good to be here.
And Amy Day. Amy is one of our, now, I know this changes sometimes. Is it dispatcher, communications, telecommunications? What's the official?
Right now, the state police, we have regional dispatchers.
Regional dispatchers, okay.
And
all right.
my official title that they decided to make very, very short and convenient is the Regional Dispatch Center Shift Supervisor.
Bigger the title, the bigger the responsibility. You know what?
That's right.
That's correct.
And we'll talk a little bit about that, how it became regional, because that's not too long ago. Things changed abruptly for the Indiana State Police. We had some things come in here and kind of change things up, didn't they?
Oh, it did. It did. I've been involved in the whole thing since it all started.
I remember that, yeah. Well, let's jump right into that. We're going to, and first off, we want to say thank you for what you do, both of you, especially you, Amy, for what you guys do on the radio each and every day and how you keep us safe. Us men and women out there doing the job, and it's you folks behind the scene that do that, and a lot of times you're not thanked, but thank you for what you do. We appreciate that. And I know Governor Holcomb is sincere about that when he announced the Telecommunications Appreciation Week for what you guys do, and that was April 8th through the 14th.
Yes.
Just kind of a little extra to say thank you for what you do, and we really thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, let's jump in, Irv. A few years ago, the state police kind of went to a new side of telecommunications, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
How did that work out? How's it going?
Well, it's going good. What was able to be done is the Indiana State Police, we had a problem with technology. We didn't really have much in the dispatch arena, and we needed to reinvest into it. At the time, we had 18 different state police districts, and we needed basically through the governor's office at the time, we need a little bit more efficiency. So they kind of come back to ISP and said, hey, we need to update, but we need to make sure we're being efficient at it. So basically we started doing studies and determined that the best way of doing it would be get down to where we have 6 regional dispatch centers. So we're talking about 18 different districts to getting down to 6 regional dispatch centers. And the reason why is because of the amount of money to improve our technology.
Right.
It would have been just for the software for CAD alone, it was over like $18 million to actually outfit 18 different districts versus the 6. And then once we end up finding out that if we end up consolidating and we had the technology and the ability to do it, and plus we can actually look at creating a structure for the dispatchers themselves, because at the time, a dispatcher, the only hope she had of being promoted was a dispatcher or a supervisor. And with us consolidating the dispatch centers, we went from 114 dispatchers down to currently we're using 96 dispatchers, and we were able to create 6 regional dispatch center managers. We created normally 2 to 3 different supervisors at each one of the 6 regional centers, and then we have the dispatchers. So we was able to create something there for the dispatchers, and then the technology part, we was able to get a grant to pay for the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch with AVL, with records management that cost approximately $1.5 million to $3 million for the improvements and such. So it was a big step, and it's been a rough ride, but I think it has been a rough ride. I do want to say that again. It has been a rough ride. A lot of people haven't supported it, but in order for us to actually improve a little bit on the pay and to improve the technology, to improve the working relationship, take advantage of all the software and the ability to communicate, we needed to move down to 6. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and we've been fine-tuning ever since. And right now we're looking back now at the dispatcher because we're trying to improve theirs again, improve their salaries and improve their ability to work better.
And let's talk about that. Amy, you've been doing this 20 years, right?
20 years in January.
20 years in January. Talk a little bit about how things have changed since the time you came in. What technology has done, or what your responsibilities have become from the first time you started till today.
Well, when I first walked in, I walked into a typewriter.
Really?
A typewriter and paper cards, and everything was done by hand.
And this was at Indianapolis?
I started at the Connorsville post.
Okay.
And very small post on the east side of the state. Started
Right.
at Connorsville. We had one dispatcher 24/7.
Wow.
But you had a nice little window, and you sat by the window, and you had your typewriter, and everything was done by hand. The radio system was antiquated at that time.
Okay.
And that's what we continued to use until just a couple years before
Was that
the
low band?
transition.
Was that low band then?
Yes.
Yes. That
Low
was-
band and your TAC 4 and
Yeah.
Eileen,
Yeah. Yeah.
the big red push button.
Exactly.
Actually,
on the console.
I think they still have one of them in the museum.
They do.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you shoved your book up there and push it and you didn't know it,
Yes.
and you were transmitting.
Yep. That was what it was.
So
And-
go ahead.
As it evolved and there was some change in the technology, and Irv talked a little bit about the transition when we did the consolidation, and that was a very hard time. It was you had to really look at the aspect of, did I want to transfer? Did I want to become part of this?
Right.
And I was one of the group that did stay.
Yeah.
And it is amazing the technology now. Everything is computerized, and it's just constantly evolving. That's one of the things that I like about this, is that what you even looked at that we did 2 and 3 years ago is
outdated and gone.
to what we have now, and the technologies. And
Well, I know a lot of your work, you're talking about the CAD, a lot of those calls and calls for service and what's happening and stuff goes out over the computer to the guys anymore and gals out there working the streets, and it's not over the air a lot of more and what's happening. And that's just a big change in itself, that everybody's got the computers in the car and how that works out. But talk a little bit about what your duties and responsibilities have changed too. I mean, did you have that much training 20 years ago as to what you're doing now?
initially, yes. Our training program, the initial training is still a 9-week minimum training. Actually, it turns out to be about 12 by the time you go to different classes during that time period. So that hasn't changed. Now, what is taught there is completely different.
Yeah.
And that has changed. But then a lot of what has changed is the continuous education.
Okay.
20 years ago, you sit down and everything else that you learned was day to day. And it was kind of, oh, well, I didn't know we could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's everything. We do monthly continuous education. And throughout the year, we're required to have 36 hours of continuous education. So we do that with different training classes and different, I can't even think what they're called. What are the monthly ones that we do?
Continue ed.
CDE. Yeah, just the CDEs.
Yeah.
And they're a monthly thing that we do every month. And we do get out a lot with going out and riding with the troopers.
See firsthand.
Yes, that is a very good tool to use to go out and to ride. Not only do you learn the area better, but you get to know the guys a little bit more because you don't have that
Interaction
like you used to.
Yeah, with the post being so close and people coming in, and probably technology just hindered us a little bit on that because people don't need to come to the post as much and be seen. But Irv, talk about our calls for service. Have they increased over the years also?
Yes. What we found is in the past, Of course, we have a more up-to-date, what's referred to as the P25 radio system for the troopers in the field, and dispatchers utilize the same thing. So basically, what has happened is the mobile CAD that you're referring to is a lot of times. In the past, the troopers would be calling in information on persons, on items, on vehicles. Now they have this mobile solution in front of them. They run it. They could get direct information, direct hits, and a lot of the times the calls for service, it's increased, but we're not getting as much interaction between the dispatcher and trooper. But we do end up having that improvement. I mean that those calls coming in, because whenever there's something that is considered an officer safety issue,
right,
the dispatcher has to be involved. The dispatcher, I can't emphasize this enough, is our safety net. Mm-hmm. Without the dispatcher, I mean, we end up putting our officers in danger. So they are the eyes that actually keep over us. Besides us dealing with the bad guys there on the scene, we have to have someone that is our safety net.
Well, they're your eyes and ears back there. They're your lifeline, and
That's
they've
exactly
always
right.
been that. And I know when I was working the road, you knew when they knew something wasn't quite right.
Absolutely.
And am I right, Amy?
Yes.
I mean, you guys got that sixth sense about you that you can kind of hone in when something's not quite right out there on the road, and they're checking on you and going that extra step to find out what's happening. And that's just something you learn. You kind of got to have a special knack for this, right?
Yeah, it is not a position that's for everybody.
Yeah.
And one of the primary things that you have to be able to do, multitasking.
Oh, I bet.
Because there would be times that we're doing 6 and 7 things at one time on 2 different phone calls, answering the radio, typing stuff in the computer. So you have to be able to, officer safety is your primary goal in that. So regardless of what you're doing, if that trooper says we need help,
yeah,
it's like, okay, everything has to stop.
Everything goes by.
Everything stops. And then as soon as that stress is over from that, it's like, okay, deep breath. Now let me get back to these 5 other things I was doing.
That's right.
So it's really a very up and down with the stress level and the emotions, because it's like, and then it's like, okay, now we're good.
Yeah.
And that happens so many times a day that a lot of people, that's probably one of the things that a lot of people just can't, you can't train somebody to do that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm sure, and you guys are the lifeline a lot of times to the public. You get a lot of calls about, I'm sure, of emergency situations out there that you have to handle on the phone, be it a medical emergency or something else that's going on prior to the trooper's arrival. And you're trained in that also.
Yes, and that's one of the medical training that we do that's called EMD, Emergency Medical Dispatching. And that's another thing that has evolved. Because before it was, okay, you've learned CPR, now here's a set of cards. Mm-hmm. Now it's actually, a class that they go and they do scenario training on that, so that you can kind of, how do you ask the questions for someone to explain a medical issue when you're 50 miles away?
Right. Because they're not in a good frame of mind to explain anything.
No, and so you have to be able to learn instead of just sitting there. They can do some of that training at the class now to learn how to ask the questions to get the person calmed down. And then you have to turn around, then we have to turn around and relay that to the medical staff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of...
the eyes and ears behind the mic.
Yes.
Well, we're down to about our last minute. Irv, real quick, where do you see us going now? What's the big push now for what's happening in ISP communications?
Well, what we're trying to do now is, and we've done it to 3 of our regional dispatch centers, is we went to what's referred to as Solocom in Indianapolis, Lowell, and Toll Road. And what we're trying to do is with all the multitasking a dispatcher does do, is we're trying to make it where a lot of the phone calls they're dealing with, a lot of the radio traffic they're dealing with, we can actually go hands-free or very little hand movement, and they can actually have the headset and actually work all this together, where it's a little bit quicker, a little bit smoother for the dispatcher. And we've expanded this to 3 of the RDCs, and we're going to be doing that to the next 3. And a lot of it is about training.
Great.
We need to really do good training and stay on top of that.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking your time out for coming in. Great job as usual. Happy Telecommunications Week. We appreciate all you do.
Thanks, Rich.
All right, guys. Again, you've been listening to the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance, Cops for Kids. Thank our guests for being here today. We'll talk to you next week. Roadshow out.